Hi there, this is Martin Hoxie, and welcome to our latest ALT community call. And today I'm very grateful to be joined by Vivien Rolfe. Hello, Viv.
Hello, Martin.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Not too bad. It's just stopped raining, so it's a nice sort of sunny break in Bristol, but you can see some more clouds. So probably glad to be sat inside chatting with you, I think, over this lunchtime.
So I'd imagine a lot of the ALT community probably know you most for the work that you do around open education. You're one of the SIG officers for the Open Education SIG. But I wondered if you could just give us a fuller picture of Viv Rolfe. What does the day job entail?
The day job is weird. It's really quite different. So I moved to west of England 3 years ago from De Montfort. I'm the associate head of department of applied sciences. So we have a range of degree courses from healthcare sciences, physiology, biomedical, forensic, a whole sort of portfolio of lab-based science projects. The role is, I'd almost say it was quite operational and administrative at times. So it's overseeing, all the performance indicators, and we have all our targets, and I've got a staff group of about 35 people now, so I keep them happy. So yeah, it's quite a managerial role. It's not where I would have seen myself, but I've learned an awful lot about business processes within universities, and the targets and the boxes we have to tick to to look good in the Guardian newspaper and things like that.
So do you get much time to teach, or is it more research, or is the admin side really taking up most of your time?
I mean, it's almost a full-time role doing that. I do bits of teaching. I teach on research methods modules. One of the areas I really enjoy working in is systematic review. So I do a lot of workshops, undergraduate, postgraduate teaching around that. So yeah, I've kind of put the science aside really, because I think if you are a university lecturer, you've got to be underpinned by your research or your practice in some way. And I did feel, my research and my teaching have gone in opposite directions. So I don't do the science teaching. I must say this year I had a secondment overseeing the postgraduate certificate in higher education here for 9 months, which was absolutely fantastic. And I did feel then with my open education interests that I could start to weave a bit more of that into that programme of activity. So that was good actually, and I certainly came away from that role thinking I would like more of that. I could do that on a permanent basis. So yeah, it's tricky when you move around a lot and sort of research comes and goes, and you have to keep reinventing yourself in a way. But yeah, I'm probably at the moment looking for what would be sort of more of a long-term position to build on those sort of open education strengths. Feels like a job interview, Martin.
Well, you're, looking at your CV, it's very clear that you're passionate about learning and teaching. You're a national teaching fellow. You're a principal fellowship of the HEA as well. You're a former ALT Learning Technologist of the Year winner. So is that, so there's a number of awards there. Is that what's your real motivation behind doing that?
That's a really good question, and I know exactly what it is. I think because 10 years ago I was working in the pet food manufacturing industry, so I'm a physiologist. I went into animal care and nutrition, and then found myself at Nottingham University as a lecturer. And 10 or so years ago, I thought, how do you develop yourself? What is this role? What is this thing? And I actually I got involved in learning technology, making animations for physiology, and then I came across the award and was so interested in the criteria and so interested in the process that it really helped me understand what my role is, if that makes sense, and helped me set myself some goals and targets. So I want to be a better technologist and a lecturer. That was the route for helping myself, I guess, because I came into it all late through a different route. I avoided actually doing a postgraduate certificate myself or that formal training. So I've always found these awards really useful from a development perspective from time to time.
So it's a lot
to set
about
me on the
having
right track, yeah.
Yeah, a clear vision of what you want to achieve, and then
Yeah.
you can build your own. Well, this year you were very kindly one of the judges on the ALT Learning Technologist of the Year. But what was your experience from being an award winner to being a judge?
So I suppose that's 6 or 7 years. I must say the quality of applications were absolutely astonishing. I mean, I remember getting my award for really what was probably one area of activity around animations and science. But the commitment and the breadth of what people were doing as individuals and teams was on a different level, on an absolute different level, and very competitive. So that was incredible to see. And as a reviewer, it was really hard work. There were a lot of really in-depth and amazing applications and links to resources on the web. So I was absolutely captivated. It was hard work for several days, but totally inspirational what people are getting up to. And I think what really impresses me is, we're in these really complicated organisations, but people there, I could see, were identifying problems and really wanting to help their staff colleagues and their students, and were getting on regardless of what the institutional politics were quite often. A lot of initiatives are on, off people's own backs, and even, the individuals and the teams. So, the commitment and the passion for what they do I see I'm gushing, was totally inspirational. And the review day in London was just a great day. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
I suppose having been on both sides of the fence, we won't find out the award winners until the conference in September. But is there, for people thinking about entering the awards for next year, any tips you can give people as a judge now?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of reviewing for the HEA as well, and all sorts of fellowships, and this one now. I think what really struck me is I could tell the people that had been for awards before, because they can write with impact, they can put themselves down on paper, and I could really tell the people that perhaps didn't understand the process. And actually, I think that's really important, because I think, when we're applying for promotions, when we're going for new jobs, we have to fulfill job criteria and put ourselves down on paper. So I think as a development process, there were people there and teams there that perhaps were a bit more novice at it. So I think that's perhaps something ALT could think about. Is, I know we had the webinars to introduce the scheme, but I think there needs to be maybe some informal mentoring. I'd be more than happy to help. To get yourself down on paper. It's writing with impact, isn't it? It's blowing your own trumpet, which we're not very good at. But there's a little technique to it too. So I felt sorry for the candidates, where it felt like a bit of a shopping list of loads of amazing stuff and projects. But, well, I know you're doing great stuff. Where's the impact of that? Where have you changed your colleagues' experiences? Where did that, impact on the learner experience? Making that connection wasn't there. So that would be my feedback to candidates and to the association. So maybe we can think about it a little bit differently next year.
It's funny you should mention impact, because I don't know how many people know this, but I applied for the awards many moons ago, and I didn't even get shortlisted. And I know, travesty.
What?
But it was on that very thing. It was, you know, the feedback I got from the judges was very nice, in terms of being constructive, and it was, you know, they could see I'd done some really interesting stuff, but there was, you know, it was that impact side that was missing. But yeah, so I can, having gone through the process myself and not got very far of it, I can completely appreciate where you're coming from with that one.
Yes, and so you wouldn't know that, would you? You know, until you've gone through that process. So that's why it's an important thing, whether it's for learning technologist, whether it's bioscience of the year, whether it's your own university teacher fellowship application process. I think I would encourage anyone to get stuck in and have a go, but take that feedback on the chin, and you're going to improve, you know, the impact that you can sort of create about yourself through going through that process and learning from it. And there's plenty of people out there that would sort of encourage and help and mentor. So yeah, I took 3 attempts at my National Teaching Fellow. It was like trying to pass my driving test. It took 3 attempts. But, you know, looking back, I was better for it, because through that process, I was mentored by someone that was the head of the politics department. Boy, did he teach me to write. And of course, then another mentor another year was the most amazing and wonderful Richard Hall. And he's just an inspiration at De Montfort to hang out with. And I'm almost glad I failed as many times as I did, because I was mentored by incredible people and created lasting sort of friendships as well. So there we go. Always something positive to come out of everything, isn't there?
I suppose bringing this back to open, that's I suppose one of, when you start doing things more in the open, that there is more of a potential for a community to be mentors and provide feedback. Have you, you're obviously involved in a number of different open initiatives and projects, and including the OER World Map. I wonder if you want to say a couple of words about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a lot written at the moment about how student boundaries blur, so how we define learners and informal learners, but I think there's not very much written or spoken about how academic boundaries blur. So my you know, I'm a typical example, aren't I? My day-to-day role is nothing to do with open education, yet I'm doing all this stuff outside. It's like, I must be slightly mad. But that, you know, I feel so strongly about that, but that it's managing that blurring, isn't it? And I think what's interesting from my perspective, when I've started to do some research around where those boundaries lie and what are our ethical boundaries, you know, what should we be committing to ourselves and our colleagues and our learners, we just really don't know. I've written about this. So, you know, the technology's gone off like a steam train, isn't it? And we've got all this cool opportunity on the web. I can start an open course tomorrow, and I can go and teach on an open course tomorrow. But actually, do we stop and think, what are the implications of what we're doing? And for ourselves, of course, which is probably the last thing that would come to my mind. But so I think it's a really interesting time, but I think we always need to step back and evaluate a bit more and be a bit more critical, I think, of what we're doing. And I don't think we always do that. I think working openly, it's so interesting, isn't it? I'm thinking about this at the moment, you know, maybe 20 years ago, when I was doing my PhD and I went to a conference for the first time, that would be where you would experience your first, probably quite critical interaction at the Physiological Society. You know, that's when you got that feedback on your work, through going to conferences and being annihilated, and through publishing and peer review. And it was quite defined, wasn't it? But I'm just so fascinated from what you've just said in terms of putting an application out there on the open and inviting comments on the open. And you pick up some of the debates on Twitter sometimes, you know, our points where we're having those critical conversations, if you like, that develop us and our work, it's like a free-for-all, isn't it? And I think that's also quite worrying. Anyway, I've avoided answering your question entirely. The World Map is it's a great initiative. I really need to get stuck into that. So it's where it's Hewlett funded, and it's where Jan Newman and some of our sort of German counterparts have pulled together a mapping scenario for capturing OER activity projects. And I really think nationally we need to do this. I think we talk about how we can have more impact, how we can make ourselves more discoverable, but actually if we're not publicising what we're doing, we're not capturing it, we're pretty lousy at evaluating and publishing it. So I think the map and the OER evidence map, for example, is a similar thing. I think is a great and straightforward way of putting ourselves on the map, you know, because we are trying to have these conversations with you know, decision makers and senior managers. We should be doing OER. Well, where is the evidence? Yeah, I mean, and you know, the UK OER funding, that was, you know, 3-4 years ago. So how do we evidence where we are now to be more persuasive? So I like the idea of the World Map project, and I'm going to delve into it and put some information on it, because then we can start generating reports around the data set that it captures. And I think, you know, in the present climate of having no money or funding to do this, having more of an open way where we can all contribute a little bit, I think could be really effective. But yeah, I put my hand up for committing to get involved with that, and not having done very much so far. So that's a job for August, I think.
It's really interesting. We were talking before the call about maps and, you know, getting a sense of place and signposting to how it is nice to see things laid out in that way, so that, you know, you can start making those connections that you know, can be quite hard sometimes, because I suppose the issue of open is that it's potentially everywhere, and you can't be everywhere yourself. It's fascinating. I just want to pull you back to some of your thoughts you were saying around doing things in the open, and you know, some of the kind of the challenges of doing that. It sounds like, you know, I think there was some really interesting discussions at OER 16 around this, about, you know, the privilege of you know, that you can be open, which and also, you know, other aspects like, you know, the confidence to be open. Was there any other takeaways from OER 16 or other events that you've been to that have shaped your thinking around this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I go to the US conferences a fair amount, and it seems odd over there, because in a way the open activities and the textbook activities are obviously politically supported and more high profile now. Yet I think in terms of individual practices, because they've gone down one channel, they almost seem a bit more closed in their approaches. So I feel very proud to hang out on Twitter with some of the people that I do from the UK and through the DS106 community, who, you know, people are putting their heads on the blocks out there, like you did, really, and inviting that, because it's not without risk. It's not without risk of sort of harnessing some personal opinions that perhaps, you know, aren't professionally contained. You know, it's, again, those personal boundaries just get blurred. It's not like going to a conference and you expect to behave in a professional manner. You know, on Twitter, it's more of a free-for-all, isn't it? So I do watch all of the community with interest at the moment. I would hate to think people would get deterred and close themselves off again, because I think we're at such an exciting point in time. And I think it would be nice to think within the UK, because there are so many, I mean, that open education, our community, our conference, your conference, it is incredible. I mean, 25 countries represented, a vibrant conference of activity. If people had the money, there would have been more people there. And I think the fact that we've got that in the UK is tremendous. And I would like to see more political support, and I would like to see more buy-in from universities. But I think it's such an interesting time with sort of increased market competition. Is almost at odds with open, isn't it? You know, we're talking about sharing and communicating, yet our university missions, you know, are about looking good in a league table. I think there's some quite interesting dynamics going on. But it is still great to see, you know, the universities that are investing and doing it well, like Newcastle and Nottingham and Coventry and lots of places really investing in open still.
It's really interesting as well to see Edinburgh have, you know, recently,
of course,
you know, they've invested a lot, you know, developing what they're offering.
Yeah.
But I suppose that, you know, I first came across your work when back in the days of the UK OER program, you know, and there was a lot of money to support that program, and I remember fondly reading about the work you were doing around open education resource discovery and search engine optimization, which people should go and read. Things like the Scooter project, I think, really fascinating to have a slightly different angle. But getting to my actual question was, you know, there is no money now, and you know, I think there's that real tension between whether open is free, and it, you know, well, that would be my question then. Is open free?
And again, I think we're at a really interesting point in thinking and defining what open is. So, you know, you look back at those papers from 10 years ago, and it was about free, it was about being technically open, legally open. I had the very privileged opportunity to glance at something that Rob Farrow is about to publish, more exploring the philosophical aspects of openness and what that means. So I won't sort of blow his trump card there, but that's going to be a great read. But again, that demonstrates the importance of evaluating and reflecting where we are. So maybe, you know, open can't always be free. It's not free, is it? My time's not free. You know, it costs David a lot of money in red wine and beer to keep me doing stuff at home. You know, it's not free, but I think it's more economical. And, you know, that's the data coming out of the US now, isn't it? That they can demonstrate the use of textbooks, reducing educational fees, but actually colleges that have actively reduced their entry fee costs and prices for students, yet doubled their numbers. So there are business models out there to be had and learnt about. But I mean, to me, open is more in spirit and ethos. That's always my starting point. And then you think about the practicalities that have to go alongside that.
I mentioned at the top of the show that, you know, some of the work you're involved with and all is around the Open Education SIG. Do you want any particular highlights from that you just want to shout about? Yes,
it's really exciting at the moment. So I'm working with Teresa, which is always a total inspiration on the committee. She's wonderful. But yeah, there's a real vibrant committee and people beavering away. We're actually going through a bit of maybe a restructuring at the moment. So we've actually got people on board with clearer defined roles, because what we realised, Teresa and myself, you know, having a full-time day job and wanting to commit as much as we can, well, for me personally, was a bit of a challenge. So it's great now. There's a good group of people behind us on the committee. We're restructuring, or they are restructuring and looking at the blog and our presence on the ALT's website. And I can see on some of the documents at the moment that there's a program of webinars that are coming our way. So that's good, because I think really, if we can, it's hard working virtually, and I do this with the Association of National Teaching Fellows. It's really hard when you're full-time and you've got to work virtually as a committee, and you think, yes, we've got all the technology in the world, but actually making that work is actually more difficult than I always realise. But I think now we've got ourselves organised, we can play a really vital role in addressing, you know, and having some of the conversations we need to have, and bringing the different communities together. The thing that struck me about Edinburgh, and a couple of people came up to me and said, why aren't you talking to your library staff? You're talking about curating and organising materials on the web. Well, why aren't you talking to those people in the museums and in those industries that do that exceptionally well? And that really made me think, actually, Edinburgh, that, you know, there's lots of people out there really passionate about open education, but I think we work sometimes within our own communities a little bit too much. So we need to bring in the curators, the IT people to sort the web out, etc. So that I'd like to see certainly the SIG hosting some webinars to bring people in from other quarters. That would be really exciting. I'm sure we can do that.
I think Teresa as well has written a blog post calling to action. So if you want to
wonderful.
You want to help out with that, I think it will be on altc.alt.ac.uk/OE SIG.
That's impressive. Do you have that tattooed on the back of your hand?
It's one of the easier URLs we've got.
Yes, sure.
For me to remember. Don't ask me to say my job title. That's a nightmare. It's really interesting your point about drawing in other communities into what we do, and it was that was one of my takeaways from OER 16 as well. There was to have people from you know, the GLAM sector and there as well. I thought was really interesting, and hopefully we'll have more of that for OER 17.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, given Josie Fraser's co-chairing, and she's also a Wikimedia UK trustee, hopefully she can draw in some of her crowd to that. So we're almost out of time, but are you out and about at events in the near future? Where can people find you and
find me?
Have a chin wag with you?
Oh,
a wee blether.
A blether. I hope I've blethered sufficiently. I won't be going to ALT, unfortunately. I think I'll be grabbing a last-minute holiday. Well, look, I'm on Twitter. People can find me on there. But I am really interested in, like you've just said, sort of linking to other corners of the community to think about discovery and the impact of what we do. So bringing in the IT specialists, the curators, and you know, coming up with sort of guidelines for best practice of how we can move forward. And that's personally what I perhaps need to do over the next few weeks. So yes, Twitter's the place, isn't it, really?
Well, you won't hear me say anything against that. Well, Viv, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to continue following your exploits.
Thank you, Martin. That's been a really useful conversation, actually, really interesting conversation. Nice to chat with you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.